Arrival on Glacialis Prime. The wind cut like knives on Glacialis Prime, an ice-covered wasteland at the far edge of the Galactic Federation's territory. White stretched to the horizon in every direction, broken only by the jagged spires of ice and the glint of survival domes in the distance. This planet was not meant for comfort. It was built for testing. For Jack Turner, the lone human in the Federation Survival Academy, it felt like stepping into an old Earth nightmare. Temperature, -60°C. The voice in his translator chip murmured. Frostbite risk, critical. Time to shelter, 3 hours. Jack exhaled, his breath fogging the air. He adjusted the oversized thermal suit the Academy had given him, feeling like a clumsy astronaut on a frozen moon. Around him stood alien students from 17 different species, their unique shapes and colors vivid against the stark white landscape. Some had shimmering scales, others chitinous shells or bioluminescent skin. All were elite cadets from advanced worlds except him, the human, the outlier. At the front of the group stood Instructor Vralthok, a towering reptilian being with violet eyes and an armor-plated hide. His voice rumbled like grinding ice as he addressed the students. The ice shelter exam is simple, Vralthok announced. You will each construct a shelter capable of withstanding the coming blizzard. No prefab structures, no pre-built technology, only the tools provided. You have 3 hours. Survival is not optional. He gestured to the supply crates. Each student stepped forward and received their gear, compact survival kits containing basic tools. Jack opened his and blinked. A spoon. It was thin, metallic, utterly ordinary, an Earth-style eating utensil. He glanced around. The alien students were pulling out laser cutters, molecular shapers, thermal field generators, each piece of tech designed for rapid shelter assembly. The spoon glinted in his gloved hand. A few snickers echoed through the wind. One of the crystalline Crivians tilted her angular head and said in heavily accented galactic common, "Primitive species, always amusing." Jack gave her a tight smile, but said nothing. He could already feel the doubt in the air, the unspoken assumption that the human would fail. "Begin," Vralthok ordered. The students scattered. Teams of multi-limbed creatures set up energy emitters. A six-eyed Zorthan began constructing a force dome. Drones buzzed, cutting ice with precision. Jack stood still for a moment, then knelt and scooped a handful of snow into his glove. He squeezed it experimentally, feeling the texture. It's the right kind, he thought. Dry coal, but it'll pack. Memories stirred. Childhood winters, documentaries on the Inuit people, stories of early Arctic explorers. The knowledge wasn't in any galactic database. It was older, primal. The survival instinct of a species that had faced every environment Earth could throw at it. He set to work. At first, it felt absurd, scraping snow into blocks using a spoon. The metal bit into the snowpack with excruciating slowness. His hands ached, but gradually the blocks began to form. Thick, imperfect, but usable. As he worked, he ignored the glances. The aliens built their shelters with speed and flair, but Jack moved with calm focus. His breath came in short gasps, his cheeks burned with cold. One alien, a long-limbed Zenthari, paused to watch. "You build with that?" it asked, voice dripping skepticism. Jack smiled faintly without stopping. "Sometimes you don't need fancy tools," he said. "You just need to know how snow works." The alien blinked, uncomprehending, and walked away. The wind howled louder. Snow began to drift. Jack worked faster. He carved each block carefully, stacked them in a circular spiral, interlocking edges just like he remembered seeing in old Earth survival books. He used his gloved hands to pack snow into the cracks, forming a seal. Hours passed. The cold bit through his bones, but he didn't stop. Around him, alien shelters were starting to fail. A plasma dome flickered and collapsed. A biofield tore under the wind's weight. Panic began to ripple through the camp. Jack's half-built Igloo stood firm, each block pressed into place with care. He could feel the shelter taking shape. Low, strong, simple. He imagined how warm it would be inside, how the walls of snow would insulate him from the deadly wind. The spoon, now bent and scratched, was still clutched in his numb hand. The impossible was becoming real. And for the first time since arriving at the academy, Jack felt certain. They had no idea what a human could do when survival was on the line. The alien failures. The temperature continued to plummet as the alien students scrambled to complete their shelters. Frost crystals formed on breathing masks. The sky above, an endless swirl of silver-gray clouds, threatened the arrival of the blizzard at any moment. The ice shelter exam wasn't just a test of survival. It was a test of pride. Every species gathered here prided itself on technological brilliance or biological advantage. The idea that nature itself could defy them had simply never crossed their minds. And that, Jack Turner thought grimly as he shaped another snow block with his battered spoon, was going to be their downfall. The first failure came swiftly. A Zorthan student, her green biosuit humming, activated a plasma lattice designed to repel cold. A shimmering dome sprang up over her head, but within minutes, the bitter wind drained its power source. The dome sputtered and collapsed as she let out a distorted cry of panic. Her limbs flailed as frost crawled up her suit. "Instructor, requesting emergency evacuation," she shrieked. Her figure vanished in a flash of emergency teleportation. Jack didn't look up. His gloved hands were numb, but he kept working. He stacked another block, then another. The dome of his igloo was slowly curving inward. To his left, a team of crystalline Crivians tried to carve enormous ice panels using particle cutters. The panels shattered the moment the wind shifted. Their alien clicks and screeches of frustration filled the air as they realized speed was no match for precision. One Crivian threw its tool to the ground, its many limbs quivering. "This climate is defective," it hissed. Jack bit back a laugh. The climate isn't defective, he thought. You just never learn to work with it. The Zinthari, tall and skeletal with triple-jointed arms, constructed an energy net designed to create a heat bubble. It functioned for 5 minutes before a blast of icy wind overloaded the nodes. The net collapsed with a soft sizzle, and the Zinthari dropped to its knees, shivering uncontrollably. One by one, the shelters around Jack failed. Some aliens had used technology too fragile for nature's raw power. Others relied on biological traits that were useless in sub-zero storms. A few simply froze in place, unable to process the fact that they were losing to the weather. Jack's fingers trembled violently, his breath rattling, but the igloo walls were rising higher. His hands bled where the cold bit through his gloves. He used the spoon like a chisel, cutting snow blocks the way ancient humans had done thousands of years ago. Each block fit snugly, angled slightly inward. The key is the curve, he remembered from an old Earth documentary. The snow carries the weight. The shape holds the warmth. Nature isn't the enemy. It's the solution. Instructor Vralthok watched from a distance, his reptilian eyes narrowing. His data tablet showed failure rates rising across the field. More than half the students had already activated emergency beacons. The blizzard hadn't even begun, and the so-called elite of the galaxy were falling apart. But there was the human, still working, still building. With a spoon. Curious, Vralthok stepped closer. "Human," he rasped, his voice like grinding gravel. "Why have you not failed like the others?" Jack didn't stop working. "I built something like this before. Not for survival. Just for fun." The instructor's eyes gleamed. "Explain." Jack lifted the spoon, smiling faintly despite the frost forming on his eyelashes. "Where I come from, we've lived in every kind of place, deserts, oceans, tundras. Before we had technology, we learned from nature. My ancestors built shelters like this to survive Arctic winters. No fancy tools, just knowledge and persistence." Vralthok said nothing, but his gaze lingered on the rising dome of snow. The alien instructor was starting to understand. Jack sealed another row of blocks, hands shaking. The top of the igloo was almost closed. His breath came in sharp gasps. His muscles burned. But the shape was perfect, curved, balanced, airtight. The aliens had failed because they had never learned how to be humble before the environment. Jack wasn't fighting the snow. He was using it. The wind howled louder. The first fingers of the true blizzard began to sweep across the ice. The alien shelters collapsed in growing numbers. Emergency beacons flared red. Only Jack's igloo stood. And as the sky darkened, he knew this was what it meant to be human. The human ingenuity unfolds. The wind roared now, a living beast made of cold and fury. Ice particles lashed across the barren plains, slicing visibility down to almost nothing. The blizzard had arrived, early and without mercy. And in the middle of the chaos, Jack Turner pressed the final snow block into place. The igloo's dome sealed shut, forming a perfect arch of snow and ice. Jack exhaled in relief, his breath thick in the freezing air. His hands were nearly numb, the spoon bent and twisted beyond recognition in his pocket, but the structure stood. It's not just standing, he thought. It's solid. The sound outside was muffled instantly. The moment he crawled inside through the small entrance tunnel he'd carved, it was as though the storm had vanished. The walls of packed snow absorbed the wind's howls, cutting the noise to a soft whisper. Already, he could feel the difference. The air inside was warmer, the space safer. Jack slumped against the icy interior, chest heaving. His gloves were stiff with frost. His face burned from exposure. But he grinned. He knew it would work. The shelter wasn't beautiful. It was lopsided in places, the snow blocks uneven, but it obeyed the ancient principles of thermal retention. The cold couldn't cut through. His own body heat would warm the tiny space. Meanwhile, outside, the chaos had worsened. From a small ventilation hole near the top, Jack peered out at the alien students. The Krivians had abandoned their shattered panels and huddled under emergency field bubbles that flickered with every gust of wind. The Zenthri's heat net had collapsed entirely, leaving its thin body exposed. Several others had already been evacuated by drone, their survival declared failure. All around him, species from across the galaxy, creatures with advanced biology, superior intellect, and high-tech gadgets, were losing. And Jack, armed with nothing but ancestral memory and a spoon, was winning. It wasn't arrogance that filled him in that moment. It was something deeper, a quiet pride, the echo of millions of years of human struggle. His ancestors had hunted in frozen forests, crossed oceans in wooden boats, climbed mountains without oxygen, and now, one of their descendants had survived where aliens failed. Jack's fingers trembled as he lit the compact emergency heater, just enough to raise the temperature a few precious degrees. He pressed his back against the snow wall and closed his eyes. His mind drifted as the warmth slowly returned to his limbs. Humans don't win because we're the strongest, he thought. We win because we never stop trying. A sudden vibration on his communicator pulled him from his thoughts. Instructor Vralthok's voice crackled through. Surviving cadets report status. Jack tapped the device weakly. Turner. Shelter secure. Stable. A long pause. Confirmed. You are still operational. Jack managed a breathless laugh. Cozy as I can be. Another long silence. You are currently the only cadet with a functioning shelter. The others are compromised. Jack blinked. The only one? He hadn't realized the situation had grown that dire. He crawled to the entrance and peeked outside. In the blinding white haze, he could barely make out distant lights, teleport flares, emergency domes, figures huddled against the storm. His igloo, squat and unremarkable, stood alone. The full weight of it hit him, then, not just survival but a statement. Without high technology, without alien biology, without anything except patience and problem-solving, he had succeeded where others hadn't. It wasn't just about passing a test. It was about proving that humanity had a place in this galaxy. Time blurred. The blizzard raged on. Jack stayed awake, flexing his numb fingers to avoid frostbite, sipping melted snow, thinking about home, about Earth's vast landscapes, its countless cultures, the stubbornness woven into his species' DNA. Hours later, the first rays of pale sunlight pierced the horizon. The wind eased. The blizzard's fury faded into stillness. Jack crawled out of the igloo to find the testing field strewn with broken shelters and scattered gear. Rescue drones hovered as alien students, shivering and defeated, gathered in small groups. And standing apart from them all was Instructor Vralthok, arms folded, his piercing gaze locked on Jack's still-standing Igloo. For the first time since this assignment began, the reptilian instructor's stern expression softened, not with approval, but with respect. Jack straightened his frostbitten shoulders. The test wasn't over, but somehow he knew he had already won. Blizzard, victory, and respect earned. The morning after the blizzard broke cold and silent over Glacialis Prime. The wind had died, leaving behind an eerie stillness, the landscape coated in smooth sheets of ice and fresh snow. The alien cadets, shivering and exhausted, emerged from failed shelters and emergency rescue domes, their faces drawn with shock and defeat. And in the middle of it all, still standing as solid as when he'd built it, was Jack Turner's Igloo. A small crowd gathered as Jack crawled out of the low entrance tunnel. His suit was battered, his face pale with cold, but his breath steamed steadily in the air. His eyes scanned the ruined shelters around him, then lifted to meet the astonished gazes of his alien classmates. None of them spoke at first. The Zinthri who had mocked him the day before averted its compound eyes. The Krivians, so confident in their crystalline engineering, stood silent, their fractal bodies glittering under the weak sunlight. Even the proud Zorthans, who had claimed their force fields were foolproof, lowered their heads in shame. Only Instructor Vralthok moved, striding across the snow with slow, deliberate steps. When he stopped in front of Jack, his yellow reptilian eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Status report," the instructor growled. Jack cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. "Shelter held. No injuries. No evacuation required." He gave a weak smile. Could have used better gloves, though. A few hesitant chuckles rippled through the alien ranks. Vralthok's gaze flicked to the Igloo, the simple snow structure that had withstood what advanced technologies could not. The instructor folded his massive arms across his armored chest. "Explain your method." Jack shifted on his frozen feet, his knees stiff. "I built what's called an igloo. Humans used them on Earth's polar regions for thousands of years. The shape holds weight. The snow insulates better than you'd think. I didn't fight the environment. I used it." He held up the twisted spoon, its metal warped from hours of work. "Did it all with this." Silence fell again. One of the Krivians clicked in confusion. "No molecular shapers? No graviton stabilizers?" Jack shook his head. "Nope. Just patience, and knowing how snow behaves." The Zinthri, the same one who had sneered at him, stepped forward slowly. "Your species has done this before? In pre-space flight eras." Jack smiled. "Way before spaceflight. Before electricity, even. Cold is cold. The trick is respecting it." The alien's many eyes blinked in rapid succession, clearly stunned. Vralthok grunted. "The exam was designed to test adaptability. You adapted." He turned to the shivering crowd of alien cadets. "The rest of you failed because you relied solely on technology. Nature does not yield to gadgets." He turned back to Jack, his voice gravel deep. "Human Turner, you pass. Highest mark. Survival through ingenuity and endurance." Jack exhaled, some of the tension in his chest easing. He gave a tired nod. "Thank you, sir." The other cadets murmured among themselves, their expressions shifting from disbelief to reluctant admiration. Some approached the igloo, inspecting it with cautious fingers. A few even asked Jack polite, if halting, questions about the construction technique. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he wasn't invisible. He wasn't the outsider. He was the one who succeeded where the galaxy's finest had failed. Later, after the instructors called the end of the exam, Jack sat on the snow, sipping warm broth from his ration kit as the remains of the igloo slowly began to melt under the weak sun. Several alien cadets lingered near him, not out of pity or curiosity, but out of genuine respect. The Krivian captain gave him a crisp nod. "We underestimated your kind." Jack smiled faintly. "Most people do." The Zinthri tilted its insectal head. "I would like to learn this igloo technique for future training." Jack chuckled softly. "Sure, it's actually kind of fun. Once you get past the cold, As the rescue shuttles arrived to take them off the ice world, Jack cast one last glance at the crumbling Igloo, a small dome of snow that had rewritten his place in this academy, perhaps even in the galaxy's eyes. It wasn't advanced. It wasn't flashy. It was human, and sometimes that was enough.